Greetings, Bio54. My name is Trung Redden, and today we will be covering petroleum plastics. Here's an overview of what we will be covering today. What is plastics? I guess the better question is, what isn't plastic nowadays? Plastics are synthetic materials. They are hydrocarbon chains of organic polymers such as ethylenes and vinyl chlorides. And depending on what kind of product that you're making, you can either have a semi-solid or a solid materials such as resins or your adhesives and coatings, glues, and your solid is everything else that you see. There are many types of plastics, and that all depends on the SPI code. For example, the SPI code of 1 polyethylene terephthalate, or PET, is what you commonly see in your grocery market storing peanut butter. 2 is a high-density polyethylene, and they usually store your milk, plastic milk containers. 3s are PVC, commonly seen in construction pipings and plumbing. And 4 is a low-density polyethylene LDPE, and those are usually your plastic bags. A quick history of plastics. The first synthetic plastic was made by John Wesley Hyatt in 1869. He called it celluloid because he mixed nitrated cellulose compound with camphor and oils, an active ingredient in Vicks Vapora when you'd have like a congestion. Fast forward in history, in 1951, 2 scientists working for the Phillips Petroleum Company developed a process using refined petroleum and a metal catalyst to transform ethylenes and propylenes into a solid polymer that you see as petroleum plastics today. A generic reaction to making petroleum plastics is combining hydrocarbon gas liquids, natural gas, and energy together to make petroleum plastics. Hydrocarbon gas are made from refined crude oil, and from the chart below you can see about 7% of the crude oil is turned into the raw ingredient to make petroleum plastics. Other than being affordable, plastics are lighter and just as strong as if you were to use metal, for example. Using the PVC example with the cast iron piping, you would see that PVC is much lighter than cast iron piping, and it holds just as much pressure of water than if you were to use cast iron piping. Plastics is easier to work with compared to metals. In this case, plastics requires less heat than metal to mold its shape. The hydrophobic actions of plastics is a plus on metal because you can have rusting actions with metal. With plastics, you wouldn't have rust or any kind of oxidations reaction. Very little oxidation reaction, and it absorbs shock just as much as steel. One of the disadvantages of using petroleum plastic is that the ingredients that's put into it are non-renewable resources and they are not environmentally friendly. One of the disadvantages of plastics is that it's made from petroleum, a non-renewable source. Here is a chart from the CIA World Book. It shows the petroleum energy reserves left and how much it is estimated to run out. Like the hydrocarbon gas liquid that is extracted from petroleum, the natural gas ingredient that is used in plastic, some of it comes from hydraulic fracturing, and hydraulic fracturing is considered a unsafe and not very environmentally friendly process. The process of hydraulic fracturing requires a large amount of water and nearby water source, and it pumps chemicals down and extracts natural gas from this process. Now, the NIH has produced a warning that the hydraulic fracturing process can contaminate water supply if the equipment is not installed properly, and if there's any kind of incident of chemical spillage and overflows into the well, the water supply of the local area can be contaminated with highly volatile and somewhat carcinogen ingredients. And in recent survey of 2014, the US Geological Survey has found some aquatic ecosystem contaminated by hydraulic fracturing in the Williston Basin. Plastics contribute to greenhouse gas emission in many ways. It contributes to a carbon footprint when petroleum and natural gas is being harvested, refined, the production of the plastic, and the shipping from the starting point to the end point of each way. In 2013, the EPA has released a greenhouse gas report that the natural gas and oil industries, along with the refineries, are the second and third culprit of greenhouse gas emission. The oil and gas harvest industry contributes to 255 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, and the refinery contributed to 182 metric tons. Plastics can be hazardous for humans and all organisms if not used properly. If the plastic is under heat duress and UV degradation, say exposed to sunlight, it can lose its structure or leach chemicals like BPA and phthalates into the substance that it's in or the environment. And BPA and phthalates are known to have been linked to endocrine disruption, developmental and reproductive defects, and possibly cancer. Plastic is a pollution. As we all know from previous lectures, that it fills up in landfills. About 20% of all landfills are composed of plastic. And it's also a pollution in the sea, and a hazard for a lot of the marine organisms as well, because, for example, the plastic bags can be confused by sea turtles that they are jellyfish, and even small minute particles of plastic can be confused by fish and for food, and if that fish eats a contaminated little piece of plastic that doesn't digest into their belly and it goes up the chain, well, we from biomagnification that the concentration of contaminants will increase, and if humans, say for example, consume a contaminated fish from tuna, the contaminants gets passed on to us. Nodos, they are small pieces of plastic, for example, if crystals and microbeads made from facial cleaning products, or they can even be pieces of plastic and that has been oxidized and UV degraded over a long period of time into smaller pieces. These affect the marine organisms mainly because they are confused as food. It is undigestible to most of their bellies and does not pass through. And the same thing with contaminated organisms that go up the food chain, biomagnification. It affects humans if we consume a highly toxic, contaminated food, and that will end up affecting us and our systems, disrupting our systems. Here is a short list of plastic alternatives. I am not completely advocating for a 100% shift from plastics to the alternative, just being more aware of what you choose in your lifestyle and of some of the long-term effects that accompanies with plastic. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for bearing with me and through my accent, and I hope you have a wonderful semester.